We installed squeaks during the break. Randy, let me know and I'll talk to make sure it's working. It's working okay? Okay, good, thank you. Then go ahead and continue, Attorney Raymond.
Thank you. In Exhibit 274, what is the jury seeing in Exhibit 274?
Exhibit 274 is a photograph of a spent cartridge shell that was located on the floor under the blue workbench. It would have been located closest to the west wall of the basement and at the south end of the workbench, which is the end closest to the stairs and that floor safe.
And just for those that are not super familiar with firearms, what is a casing?
A casing is the metal component that is hollow and has gunpowder within it. If we look at the round cylinder end of this particular casing, you can see there's a light colored yellow insert around the green metal portion of the casing. That is the primer end of the casing. The projectile is attached to the opposite end and is usually crimped to create a seal. The primer from the firing pin from the firearm will strike the primer end. Again, that primer end is that light yellow colored disc within inside of the green metal surrounding it. When it strikes the primer, it creates an explosion and ignites the gunpowder within inside of the bullet. The pressure within inside of the capsule, because it's sealed, forces the projectile out of the out of the casing down the barrel of the firearm. And that's essentially how it works.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm going to show Exhibit 275. What are we seeing on Exhibit 275?
Again, this is another photograph of the same projectile that was located on the floor in the basement. Again, we can see that inner disc that is a lighter yellow color or gold color, and then there's a darker green casing for the casing itself. This casing was actually located on the basement floor by crime scene investigator James Plenty, who then called to my attention that he had found something. And then I came down and assisted him in the basement with taking these photographs.
Might have just had it on there accidentally. I think it's just 284. Yes. Okay. So, Deputy, I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 284. How would you describe Exhibit 284?
Exhibit 284 is the casing that was collected by myself. It is the casing that was in the previous photograph that was on the floor under the workbench. It has a alpha marker letter G. Letter G was one of the placards that we seen in a previous image of the overall images, and it was yellow in color. It is affixed with evidence ID number 41877 that I applied. It's a sheriff's office evidence barcode number. It also has the Wisconsin State Crime Lab case number that is the same as previously mentioned, and they sub-designated this item of evidence as letter AH.
This time I would move Exhibit 284 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
And Deputy, I'm also going to give you Exhibit 26. This is a bullet given to Mitchell Halderson by the defendant. I'd ask you just to just look at those both, 284 and Exhibit 26. And I'd ask if you see any similarities between the items.
They are similar in color. I also know that the head stamp is the same. Now, the head stamp is the manufacturer's stamping that is on the head or the primer end of the casing. It's not on the primer, it's on the casing, so it's not on the yellow portion of the disc, it's on the green portion of the metal casing. When I first saw this casing that was in the basement, I'm looking for the name of a manufacturer. A lot of times the manufacturers will put their initials or they may even put the full name of the company that manufactures them. This particular company did not. This particular company put a logo on there, and knowing that this type of casing is consistent with a cartridge that would be used for a AK-47 or an SKS type rifle, I was wondering if it was maybe some type of imported ammunition from another country, and that's what I was trying to decipher. I later learned that the writing that is on the crown of the head stamp is for a company named Barnaul. I also observed that on the head stamp along the lower arch of that round casing, the number is 7.62 by 39, and that is the same head stamp that is on the exhibit number 26, Sheriff's Office ID number 417, which is the ammunition from M. Halderson. This particular piece of evidence, as we look in comparison to the casing of the one that was found within the basement, it is just the casing. And if we look at the one that is marked as Exhibit 26, it has a copper-colored projectile that is still intact. It also has a primer in it, and that primer is not dented, indicating that this is a complete round and it has not been fired.
So Exhibit 26, not fired. Exhibit 284, a fired casing.
Yes, a fired casing, also referred to sometimes as a spent shell casing.
And I'm going to leave these two up here. We have more ammunition we're going to compare in a minute. Deputy, how would you describe Exhibit 276?
Looking at Exhibit 276, we're facing to the east. This is on the north side of the basement, or the north half of the basement. We see that there's a wooden bookshelf, the natural wood color to the right. There's a safe that is black with a silver face next to it. We can see that there's a plastic table, and then there are two folding chairs that are folded in the chair position, and there are two additional chairs on the left side of that image. If we look at the concrete type floor, the concrete floor as well as the walls in the basement are painted in a gray type paint. We can see that there is a defect on the floor that is on the photographer's side or the near side of the chair that is to the right in this image. The defect is a white, in this image appears to be a round or elliptical type defect.
Exhibit 277.
Exhibit 277 is a medium shot of that same defect in the concrete floor.
Exhibit 278.
Exhibit 278 is the same defect. This time we've added evidence marker letter H to it. We can see that when we get closer with the imagery that there is some depth to the defect, and it is not uniform in its edges are jagged.
And why is this defect interesting to you?
There were other defects on the floor, but this defect was interesting because it was absent of grime. Now, I can't say that it's fresh, but I can tell you it is not aged like the other defects that were on the floor. It doesn't have dirt or debris within that defect like the other defects had. It's not uncommon for a basement floor to have scratches or gouges, but this one, it stood out, and it still had like a powder, like busted concrete texture within the defect itself.
547, what are we looking at in 547?
In 547, we're looking at the floor on the south half of the basement. We are on the west side of the basement facing to the east. We see evidence markers letter F, and we see evidence markers letter G. Now, if we look, you can see that the basement floor doesn't look the same as in the original images that we had taken. This photograph was taken after the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory Field Response Unit came out to assist us. It consisted again of Nick Stahlke, John Ertl, and the two photographers that came out to do the luminol. And what you see here is the residue, the white residue that is left behind when luminol is sprayed onto the hard surface. I further say that letter F and letter G are areas that fluoresced or luminesced that we collected swabs from the concrete floor.
Which brings us to Exhibit 287. Deputy, could you please look at the labels on Exhibit 287 and describe what 287 is?
287 are 3 swabs from the south side of the basement area, G, F, and F. The Sheriff's Office barcode number is 41884, and it also has Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory case number with subdesignations of AB, AB1, AB2, and AB3. Now, in the image I told you, there were 2 areas that were collected. The area F was swabbed twice, so 2 swabs were taken from area F, and they were collected separately.
I would move 287 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
How would you describe Exhibit 292?
I'm not sure I heard you correctly. Was that 292?
Yes.
Exhibit 292 is a photograph that I took of the basement. Again, this is in the south side of the basement. It is in the southwest corner. As we see now, the freezer has been removed and collected as evidence. It is no longer in front of the wire rack rolling storage unit that has the supplies on it. We can see the left side of the photograph, there's the gray door with the silver handle for the upright vertical freezer. There's a shop vac that is on the floor. And then we can see that there's an area that protrudes north of the foundation itself. That would be the area below the front steps that would be commonly referred to as a stoop. And in some instances, in home construction, they get filled in. In other instances, they get capped off and they can be used as additional storage areas.
Exhibit 293.
Exhibit 293 is a photograph of the it's on the south side of the basement. It is the southwest corner. We can see the cinder block wall, and then we can see above the cinder block wall, there are silver pipes. Those silver pipes are conduit that contain electrical wires within it. You can see the junction box that is affixed to the cinder block wall. We can see that there are a couple pieces of wood that are attached to the wall, and the area above the cinder block has a wood construction creating a wall above the cinder block. You can see.
Oops, sorry.
You can see that there's the gray paper-like material. It's got some red writing on it. That is the paper side of the insulation that was placed inside of that cavity. The area that is between the 2x4 studs and it's for insulation purposes.
Exhibit 294.
Is just another photograph of that same area. Again, we can see the red markings for the insulation.
And what does Exhibit 295 display?
Exhibit 295 is an area, the cavity that is exposed once the insulation is removed from the studs. And when we look in the lower portion of that image, we can see that steel pipe, and then beyond it, there are some black triangular looking pieces. Those pieces are consistent with a mouthpiece that would be used on a vape type instrument, which is an instrument that a person sometimes uses if they're a smoker to mimic cigarettes.
And was this vape mouthpiece out in the open like this, or was it behind insulation?
It could not be seen. It was concealed within that cavity, and it was covered with the insulation.
Upon learning that, did you guys then remove more insulation in the area?
We removed all the insulation in the basement after seeing that. There was an indicator that somebody was hiding something in the basement. Those were put there purposely. They're not left there by accident.
Exhibit 296.
Exhibit 296, we can see in the bottom left portion those same vape mouthpieces. However, as I pulled back more of the insulation and exposed the cavity created by the 2x4 walls, you can see the magazine from a firearm that also contains bullets. The magazines are concealed within the wall and hidden with the insulation covering them, so they could not be seen unless the insulation was removed from the wall.
So the magazines were hidden behind the insulation.
Correct. They could not be seen without removing the insulation. And the insulation was put back into place, as it really did not look out of place. But during our extensive search, I decided to pull back insulation and dig a little bit deeper and a little bit further, and this is what I found.
And obviously by magazine, you don't mean Sports Illustrated. What's a magazine for people that are not gun users?
So a magazine is a part of the firearm. Not every firearm has them, but on some firearms that are semi-automatic, they have a storage container that is called a magazine. The bullets are pushed into the magazine from the top, and when you see the bullets, that is the top of the magazine. As you push the next round in, they compress a spring that is at the base. And the magazines have different capacities. These magazines hold multiple rounds of ammunition. That magazine is then placed into the firearm, and then the spring will feed the firearm and force additional ammunition into the chamber of that firearm as it cycles each time the trigger is pulled.
What do you observe in Exhibit 297?
Exhibit 297 is after I pulled the insulation from the wall, I stepped back and took an overall photograph. This is for reference, so a person who was not there can understand where within the basement those were located.
How would you describe Exhibit 298?
Exhibit 298 is a close-up of the 3 magazines that I located concealed within the basement wall. The magazines are of a polymer or plastic-like material, and there are 3 of them. I collected each of them. One of them listed as the front, which is the one closest in the image. One listed as top, which is the one in the highest portion of this image, and then one listed as bottom, which is the one that's leaning over on the far right side of this image.
Exhibit 299, how would you describe Exhibit 299?
Exhibit 299 is when I completely remove all of the insulation. Again, this photograph is to show the condition in which they were found and in relation to the vape mouthpieces that were located. Again, just a reference.
Exhibit 300.
Again, this is another perspective allowing a better view of the 3rd magazine, the one that's listed as bottom. In each one of these magazines, we can see that there are bullets in each of those magazines.
And 301. Just another perspective view.
Again, it's just another reference photograph so that the viewer can have a understanding as to where they were located within the basement.
And same for 135?
Correct. It's an
Or, sorry, 302.
The 302 is a overview, again, showing in relation to the storage shelf and the magazines.
Deputy, I'm going to approach you now with Exhibits 288, 289, and 290. And I'm going to have you describe the labels on Exhibit 288 first.
Exhibit 288 is the magazine that was listed as the front with ammo. It's got evidence ID number 42258 affixed to it.
I would move at this time Exhibit 288 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
And I'd ask that you open it up, and I'm actually going to have you count the amount of rounds in that magazine. Yes, thank you. Will you just hold it up for the jury? All right, now if you would count the rounds, sir.
So rounds have been removed.
Okay. It's okay, they don't have to be standing up, just count the amount.
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
20, okay. And that was Exhibit 288. If you would return the rounds and magazine to the box. And I'm going to have you repeat the same procedure with item 290.
Item 290 is the rifle magazine listed as bottom with ammo that I collected from the wall.
Okay, I would move Exhibit 290 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
And again, I would ask that you count the bullets. No need to display them if you just want to count them.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
All right, thank you. If you want to return those items to the bag, to the box. And finally, I'd like you to repeat the same procedure with item 289. And what does the label from your department say for 289?
Exhibit 289 is a rifle mag topped with ammo, evidence ID number 42259. This is a magazine which I collected that was concealed within the wall.
All right, I would move 289 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
It is received.
And again, yes, please, count the rounds.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
So only 15 rounds in Exhibit 289.
That is correct.
So missing 5 rounds as compared to the other 2 magazines.
Yes.
Okay. Now, but maybe before you close that, the bullets in all 3 of these magazines, is their ammunition consistent with each other?
Yes, and looking at the head stamp on the ammunition, they're all the same color, the same caliber, 7.62 by 39, and they all have the same head stamp from the manufacturer that is the logo for Bernal.
And is that the same head stamp that you identified in the Get Well bullet as well as the casing found on the basement floor?
I don't recall which one was a Get Well bullet.
Oh, I'm sorry, Exhibit 26.
Yes, they are all the same.
Okay. This one just has Get Well written in Sharpie on it. So all of the ammunition that is displayed up here is all the same caliber, all the same head stamp.
That is correct.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Deputy, approximately how many hours did you spend processing this place?
I would suggest over the 3-week period, it was roughly 10 to 12 hours a day, not working every day. We did have a couple days off in there.
So the pictures that were shown to the jury today, were those all taken in the same day or in different days?
They were taken in different dates. They were not taken all at the exact same time, no.
Now, as far as you being at that home, is this your first time that you were in the Halderson household?
In reference to this investigation, yes, I'd never previously been at that residence.
So you mentioned multiple times that the way you photographed things that day was how it was when you got there, correct?
Correct.
Nothing.
When I entered under the guise of the search warrant, we photographed the entire interior of the residence, how we found it. And again, I talked earlier about wearing booties and the cross-contamination. You just cannot get past that. But nothing else was moved when the initial photographs are taken. And when we walk through and we're taking our notes, and I talk about that golden hour with Deputy Plenty, we're not moving or touching anything. We're simply looking.
And along those lines, would you agree with me that your role is primarily to take in the scene, not necessarily analyze the scene? Does that make sense?
I would disagree because My role as a crime scene investigator differs from a detective. When I'm at the scene, I'm trying to read what the scene is saying. I'm trying to interpret what the scene is saying. The detective, they get verbals. They talk to their witnesses, their victims, their suspects, and they are able to communicate verbally. I have to interpret what has been left for me. I have to try and essentially analyze, for lack of a better term, what is there and what isn't there.
So along those lines as well, are you the individual that gets to determine what is of evidentiary value and what is not of evidentiary value?
I'm one of the people, yes, I am.
And I believe in this particular location, it would be you and Deputy Plenty.
That is correct. Now, and additionally, we do our investigation and we're making a evaluation as we're doing it, and we're identifying what needs to be done to the scene, okay? That first evaluation, what additional resources are we gonna need? Are we gonna need help from other agencies, be it the State Crime Laboratory Field Response, the ATF, DCI's State Fire Marshal's Office? All of that is going in and taking place. Once we sequence what is going to happen, we roll out our plan. Now that changes, and things happen that allow us to continue, and then there's roadblocks that we have to stop and change our direction, our course of attack, if you will, on processing this scene. Once that is all done, again, we talked about that communication with the detectives and having an understanding as to what's taking place outside of the crime scene. I don't know everything that has taken place. I don't know every interview that is being conducted. So what we do then is, once we're done with the processing of all of the evidence that we find forensically, we then bring the detectives into the scene and they do a wall-to-wall search. And during that wall-to-wall search, they're looking for additional documents that they might have an understanding that has relevance to the case that I would have no knowledge of, because I'm not the one out doing the interviews. This is a team approach, and we need the detectives to give us information. We give the detectives information, and then we have them come in and we release the scene to the detectives so they can do their wall-to-wall search for additional things that we may have not had any knowledge that may or may not have been important.
So in conjunction with you and the crime scene team, along with the detectives, it's fair to say that this house was very thoroughly processed.
Yes, I referred to the search when the walkthrough was conducted with the district attorney's office. I used a term that when we get done with the search, when we're done with a tornado search, we'll find everything. And the district attorney looked at me and wondered what tornado search was. And I told them that we will turn the house upside down, looking for whatever piece of evidence is in here that would have any value to this case. And that's what we did.
And the DA has placed all of the exhibits that they've presented to you in that corner. That's not even half of the exhibits or of the evidence that was collected in this case, correct?
That is correct.
And when we're talking about exhibits and evidence, we're not only talking about anything that could contain blood, we're talking about digital evidence such as flash drives, anything like that this house had, you would have collected and processed.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, going into the blood evidence that you had talked about in direct examination, you essentially performed two types of tests, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the first one was just to see if there was a presence of blood. Is that correct?
That is correct. That would be the phenolphthalein test that detects just simply the presence of blood.
And then that second one was that hexagon OBDI or OBTI test.
That is correct. The hexagon OBTI, that differentiates between human blood and non-human blood.
The tests that were performed on this blood initially from you, they cannot tell you when that blood was placed on that location, correct?
No, they cannot.
And I think you might have mentioned this in direct examination, but I'll say it again. It cannot tell you, these tests cannot tell you whose blood that is.
No, that is that's the screening process that we utilize, again, to get the best probative value for the evidence that we're allowed to submit to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. And that's when the DNA evaluation and testing is conducted at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. That is not something that is done in-house by any sheriff's office in Wisconsin.
And along those lines, those two tests that you performed on the blood, they cannot tell you how it was that the blood was placed there.
No, they cannot.
Same with the physical evidence that you recovered. So for example, we spent some time talking about metal fragments that were located in the basement. Do you recall those?
Yes, I do.
Now, you're able to determine that they're metal fragments, correct?
That is correct.
And maybe you're able to determine that they're, I think you refer to them as projectiles.
Consistent with the lead fragment of a projectile, yes.
But a thorough, conclusive saying that this metal fragment is a projectile, that's not something that you would be able to do, correct?
No, that would again go to a subject matter expert at the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in the firearms section.
And again, as far as you're concerned, you cannot tell us when those metal fragments were placed there, correct?
No, I cannot.
And generally, you cannot tell us how they were placed there.
No, I cannot do that either, no.
And that goes with any kind of physical evidence that you recovered at the household, correct?
Could you ask the question again?
Sure, yeah. So I specifically talked about the metal fragments, but
Yep.
as far as any kind of physical evidence that you collected, you weren't able to tell the jury or anyone how it was placed there, correct?
In respect to the metal fragments or any evidence?
Any evidence.
That is not
located.
correct.
So there's some evidence that you are able to say how it was placed there.
Correct.
Could you give me an example?
The bloodstain patterns.
And when we're talking about the bloodstain patterns, that's quite literally the pattern, not how the blood was placed there, just the pattern, correct?
Correct. Well, the pattern will tell us basically how it was applied. So when we look at the face of the safe and we see the stains that are on the face of the safe, they're pretty much round and they're small. And that tells us that those stains impacted on that safe at a 90 or near 90-degree angle. So the face of the safe is a horizontal surface. So the blood is deposited onto the face of the safe at a 90-degree angle.
But again, you do not know when it was placed there.
I cannot say that, no.
I don't have any more questions for you. Thank you.
Any redirect?
One brief question. The jury previously and counsel, I think, mentioned some of the photos. The video that Scott Coons, the slow walkthrough of the property, was that done before or after photos being taken?
I cannot recall exactly the time. It was on the same day, but I do not recall if that was prior to or after.
Sure. Was it done before any items were moved?
Nothing was moved.
Okay. That's it?
May this deputy be excused and released? Or no? Not released, but excused. Are there any, well, I know we should get the,
Yes,
I will
I
ask
will.
him to, with your assistance, to box up the
Absolutely.
exhibits that are there before we proceed to the next witness. Thank you, sir. Thank you again.
The state's gonna call Nick Stahlke Tuesday.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Good afternoon, sir. If you are able to safely and responsibly testify without a mask, that would be our preference for the purposes of witnesses, if you could. Thank you so much. Go right ahead, counsel.
Hold on one sec. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name for the record, spelling both your first and last name?
Nick Stahlke, Nick, Stahlke.
How are you employed?
I'm a forensic scientist with the State Crime Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin.
And what sort of training did you have to go through to become a forensic scientist?
I have to have a minimum of a 4-year degree or a bachelor's degree. My degree is in medical technology and chemistry.
And where did you get that from?
St. Cloud State University.
And then what, did you have any further training after that?
I have a lot of different training sessions that I've attended over the 30-plus years that I've been a forensic scientist.
Well, could you give us the highlights? What are some of the specific trainings you have?
Well, I had training in crime scene response processing. I had a course in advanced scene processing, a bloodstain pattern analysis, bullet trajectory, fracture match, or physical match, and all the other associated training that's required for the processing of crime scenes.
Okay. And is one of the things that you've had training and experience with luminol?
Yes, it is.
And what is luminol?
Luminol is a chemical when added to a scene that has the presence of blood and a hydrogen peroxide will cause a chemiluminescence.
Okay, so it's a chemical that when added to blood, it'll cause it to react under a certain light?
Yes, it does. When blood is present and you add luminol, the blood reacts as a catalyst, causing the blood to actually luminesce or give off light.
Okay. And what is it used for?
We utilize luminol for determining whether or not there's a cleanup at a crime scene. I also like to use it for determining what has actually occurred if there's been any movements within a crime scene that isn't necessarily understood from just the visible blood that we see at a scene. So it's helpful in identifying on non-visible blood at a crime scene.
So it allows you to see blood that is not able to be seen with the naked eye.
That's correct.
In the course of this investigation, were you asked to luminol some vehicles?
Yes, I was.
And was one of those vehicles a Volvo belonging to a Krista Halderson?
It was.
And what, if anything, were the results of that luminol?
It was negative.
And what does that mean?
That means that, first of all, when we did the examination of that vehicle, we always do a visual examination. I did not see any visible blood. We followed that up with then the application of luminol, which again is you see a visible reaction for non-visible blood from the application of luminol, and I did not get a reaction from that.
And I'm showing you what has been marked as exhibits 342, 343, and 344. How would you describe exhibits 342 through 344?
Exhibits 342, 343, and 344 are photographic images of vehicles that I processed
Okay.
in this case.
And I would move 342 through 344 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
They are received.
And I'd ask for the Elmo. And 342. Was this the Volvo that you processed?
It is.
And no signs of blood in that Volvo.
That's correct.
And 343. Was that the Outback, Subaru Outback vehicle that you processed belonging to Bart Halderson?
It was.
Okay. And what result did you have with luminol with that vehicle?
Again, it was negative.
And then I'm going to show you 344. Is this another vehicle that you at least took a look at?
It is.
And did you perform luminol on this vehicle?
I did not.
And why is that?
The condition of the vehicle, all the items that were located within the vehicle would suggest that none of those items had been removed or had been replaced. All those items seemed to be in the condition that it had been for some period of time. So in my estimation, it wasn't necessary to attempt luminol for this particular vehicle.
And 344 is specifically the vehicle that was owned by Kat Melander, the girlfriend in this case?
That was my understanding.
So let me ask you, if I have something that is bloody, but I put it in some sort of plastic, would luminol detect stains on the flooring underneath?
No, if there's no contact with luminol on the surface that is being tested with luminol, it will not detect or give any kind of reaction to the application of luminol.
So similarly, like putting on gloves, you don't see fingerprints. If you wrap something in a barrier, it would prevent the luminol from picking up on blood.
That's correct.
This was turned over. It says PowerPoint. I have an additional photo. I didn't put those in. That's fine. And sir, did you write a report in this case?
I did.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 548. Could you please describe Exhibit 548?
Yes, Exhibit 548 is a copy of my confidential report of laboratory findings.
And why do you write reports with the results from your investigation?
We always write reports so that everyone understands that we were there to, performing a duty, and those then, when we have conclusions that from our examinations, we need to report those to the
And
to the
is
agency.
Exhibit 348 a true and accurate copy of your report?
Exhibit 548?
I'm sorry, 548.
Yes, it is.
All right, I'd move Exhibit 548 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
It is received.
And just for completeness, Exhibit 303, is that a copy of your curriculum vitae?
Exhibit number 303 is, yes.
I would move exhibit 303 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
Now, the cars were just a small part of what you looked at in this case. Is that fair?
Yes, it was.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit 304 and exhibit 305. And in connection to this case, you created a PowerPoint.
Yes, I was asked to do that, yes.
Okay. And exhibit 304 is just the USB of your PowerPoint? And exhibit 305 is a printout of your PowerPoint.
Exhibit 305 is that, yes.
Okay. I'd move exhibits 304 and 305 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
They are received.
Let me get it set up before I have you switch it, Judge. Okay. If you want to switch it.
I think we did.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
So exhibit 305 is a PowerPoint with 23 slides approximately.
Yes,
Okay. And in the first slide, that's just the outside of the house that you processed.
that's correct.
And that house is the 4595 Oak Springs Circle address.
It was.
Okay. And what do we see on slide 2?
I like to describe this house as a tri-level, but it actually has 3 levels above ground, 4th level being the basement. So this would be the lowest level. This is the foyer at the front door. This off to the left is the family room. Behind us would be the entrance to the garage. And in the middle there, in the top center of the photograph, is the entrance to the basement or the lowest level.
Now, did you luminol the entire house?
No, we only luminoled those areas that of concern. And those areas were the basement, the foyer here. There's a bathroom then up on the top right corner of this photograph. We did that one as well, and then the garage.
Okay.
And the family room, if I didn't mention that.
Okay. And slide 3. How would you describe slide 3?
Slide 3 is the lowest level. This would be the basement. The basement was split basically in two, divided by a dividing wall. This would be the north half of the basement.
Okay. And how would you describe slide 4?
Maybe, I'm sorry, I think that's the south, actually the south side of the basement, because the front door is facing south. So this would be, when you go down the basement stairs to the right and just to the left, then that is the on the north side of the basement, so the south side of the basement. This is the south side of the basement. This then is the floor of the south side of the basement.
Slide 5.
Well, the first, the slide just before this was a photograph of the floor with white light. This is a photograph then with a long lens opening with no light at all other than the light that is being generated by the application of luminol, and then a small pop of light or flash so that we can get an idea of the relative positions of the items within the scene to the luminol itself. If we didn't do that, all you would see would be the luminescence of the luminol reacting to the presence of whatever it's reacting to.
Now, the blue area that's for lust, I believe you said, is that all blood that it's reacting to?
This could be blood that it's reacting to, yes.
Exhibit, or slide 6. What is slide 6 depicting?
Because we only applied small areas of luminol to the basement floor in small intervals or in sections. This is a second photograph of application of the luminol closer to the camera itself.
And you said that the luminescence could be blood. Could it be something else?
Well, it does luminol does react with bleach or any other chemical that has some metals in it. Also, some plant materials will give some false positives.
So if somebody had cleaned the floor with bleach, that might also respond to your luminol.
It can, yes.
What about hydrogen peroxide? Would that cause any luminol?
Well, to cause the reaction of luminol, actually luminol is part of the chemical reaction of luminol. When you apply luminol, you're applying a basic solution with luminol and with the addition of hydrogen peroxide, which is an oxidizer, causing the luminol then to react to the iron that's in the hemoglobin of the blood to luminesce. So hydrogen peroxide is actually a part of this then. Hydrogen peroxide is also a good cleaning agent or a bleach, which will remove stains and break down cellular material like blood.
Slide 7, what is the jury seeing?
Okay, slide 7 is the opposite direction of the previous slides. The previous slides had the camera in the position just this side of that small chest freezer looking our direction. In this case, this photograph is looking in the opposite direction.
When you are luminoling this area and the area that we just looked at and you're getting some fluorescence, is anybody else swabbing that area or testing it for blood in any manner?
Once we identify an area that is reacting, giving us a positive reaction to the application of luminol, we then swab it to get a sample, and then we test it again with phenolphthalein, which is a presumptive test for the presence of blood. And because luminol isn't specific to blood, we need a second test to determine if there is potentially blood present. And so we always follow up any positive luminol areas with a presumptive test called phenolphthalein, excuse me.
And did Greg Leatherberry, in this case, perform those tests?
I performed the phenolphthaleins. I think Greg may have assisted with that, but he collected all of those samples.
Okay. And did he perform, oh, you did the phenolphthalein though?
Yes.
Okay. And so going back to slide 5, did you swab and test any of that, slide 5?
Yes, we did.
And did it test positive for blood?
It did. Presumptive positive for blood. Yes.
Sure. And slide 6, did you swab or test any of those areas?
I did.
And did any of those test positive presumptive for blood?
It did.
All right. Slide 8. Oops, I'm sorry. I went to 9. Slide 8. What is the jury viewing in slide 8?
Slide 8 is a view across the basement from south to north. The basement stairs is off to the left. The previous views in the previous slides would have been to our right, looking down the south side of the south half of the basement area. This is looking across from then the south side of the basement to the north side of the basement.
And slide 9. What are we viewing in slide 9?
Slide 9 would be then the north side of the basement.
Slide 10?
Slide 10 is the north side basement floor.
And then slide 11. What is the jury seeing in slide 11?
Slide 11 is the north side basement floor after the application of luminol.
And did you, after applying luminol and getting some fluoresced areas, were those areas swabbed?
We did swab some areas in the north side, yes.
Did you test them with phenolphthalein to see if they tested positive for blood?
We did. In this particular case, I don't recall if any of these were positive for presumptive test presence of blood.
Sure, so it might have been bleach or some other cleaning agent.
Correct.
What is the jury looking at in slide 12?
This is the basement floor on the, again, on the north side, but closer to the stairs that leading down to the basement or leading up to the foyer.
And slide 13.
This is the same area, however, with after the application of luminol.
And how would you describe these results on slide 13?
These gave a very strong reaction to the presence of luminol. I believe we also had a couple of positive reactions to the presumptive test of phenolphthalein as well. But there were some footwear impressions, apparent footwear impressions in blood in this area. And you can see that in this photograph.
How would you describe slide 14?
Slide 14 then is a view from the north side of the basement toward the stairs leading up to the foyer.
And slide 15?
15?
Yes.
Slide 15 is an image of the family room. There's a fireplace there. These are also some stairs that lead up to the upper floor. A kitchen in the background there. And the foyer is off to the right.
Slide
16?
16 and then right there, 16.
16. 16 is the fireplace hearth with a floor in front of that. Appeared that there was doing some construction in this, or renovating in this room.
Slide 17, just another view.
Yep, just another view of the same thing.
And slide 18. How would you describe slide 18 to the jury?
Slide 18 is the same view as previous view However, after the application of luminol. This particular view would indicate there was some solution or a wetting of the surface that had occurred here. You can see that there's a little bit of a movement in drainage, or there's a flow pattern, for instance, for lack of better terminology here, of that luminescing area.
And
So
is-
possible cleanup as well.
And your training and experience with luminol, are you also trained in blood stain pattern or blood splatter analysis?
Yes.
Is there anything you can say about the blood staining of the basement area?
Well, you can see that there's a couple of very bright stains that are luminescing very brightly with blue. Those would be stains that are not necessarily diluted with any kind of a substance or a liquid. Those are fairly strong stains. The stains that we could visibly see in this area appeared to be more of a drip or a contact transfer.
And I'm going to go back a few slides and ask you about the blood pattern. Is there anything, this slide in the basement, slide 13, is there anything you can say about the blood pattern in that slide?
The only thing that, this is a real complex situation, I'd say, with a lot of different things going on. These are mostly transfers or just the contact of blood onto a surface. There's also some patterns then that would be consistent with footwear in blood. There's also drip patterns there as well. And there's some spatter stains off to this side or onto vertical surfaces near this.
And I'm going to go back to slide 5. Is there anything you can say about the pattern there?
These patterns are more general in that and diffuse in that it appears that there's been some wiping or cleanup.
I'm going to go back to, I believe we were at 17. Slide 18 we already talked about. Slide 19, how would you describe slide 19?
In slide 19, these had some, or we had some visible stains. And the ones that are already marked were ones that Deputy Leatherberry had visibly seen and marked with these labels, adhesive labels.
And slide 20.
20 is an image taken after the application of luminol. You can see there that there's many more stains that are visible now due to the application of the luminol. These stains are very similar in characteristic, size, and shape as the visible stains that you could see and that were already marked.
Are you able to say anything about the pattern of or splatter of these stains?
These look like stains that were drip utilized in, or that are produced from gravity alone acting upon the bloody source with the blood dripping straight to the floor. There were a couple of stains that you can see some movement toward the bottom right that are somewhat smeared. These could be consistent with swipes or wipes.
Exhibit 21, a view before you luminoled.
This is the foyer. The front door is off to the left. The garage entrance is up toward the top of the photograph. And this is from the location at the top of the basement stairs.
Slide 22, how would you describe slide 22?
The entrance to the front of the house, entrance to the left at the end of that rug, and then the entrance to the garage there at the top with the door open.
And finally, slide 23. What do you see in slide 23?
Slide 23 is in following the application of luminol. We had a positive reaction to the presence of luminol here, just inside the garage door. And this had a pattern to it. It had appeared to be a contact transfer with the shape of a possible container that may have had blood on the surface of it.
And just like with the vehicles, again, if items such as plastic tarp or other barriers were used, would that prevent you from finding blood with luminol?
Well, anything that would prevent blood from contacting a surface, which was then ultimately applied or had luminol applied to it, would not indicate or give a positive reaction to the presence of luminol.
And if blood was cleaned up with hydrogen peroxide, would you be able to find any traces of it?
Well, with luminol, because hydrogen peroxide is part of the formula of the luminol itself, it would not give a reaction. It would indicate that cleanup had occurred. It would be, but however, the hypochlorite or bleach does give a positive, negative positive, false positive for luminol.
Are you familiar with lemon at all as a potential cleaning agent?
Well, I've heard of lemons possibly being used as cleaning agents. Lemons have citric acid, and we're all familiar with vinegar, which is acetic acid. So we know that acetic acid is a cleaning agent. It's a mild acid used in removal of mineral stains and things like that, or metal staining and things on that order. So, and mineral deposits. So lemons can be used as a cleaning agent.
It's also a nice deodorizer. Smells
Yes,
good.
yes. Vinegar does have a sour odor to it, whereas lemons would not have that.
Hold on one moment. And Analyst Stahlke, did you test this last stain, slide 23, for blood?
I don't recall. If we collected it, we would have tested it. And since we collected it, pretty sure I would have tested with phenolphthalein.
Fair enough. And the chemical compound H2O2, is that the chemical formula for hydrogen peroxide?
It is.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
So I'm a bit confused. You said earlier that it could be blood, whatever is illuminating from the luminol, correct?
Correct.
And I believe the other assumption is that it could be bleach, correct?
Correct.
So whenever we see something illuminated on that TV or on the photographs, it could be bleach, yes?
Could be one or the other or both, yes.
And the only way you'd be able to do that is by doing that additional testing that you talked about with the phenolphthalein, correct?
That would give us more confidence that it is blood, yes.
And I believe you said that there were some areas where it couldn't be detected if what was being illuminated was in fact blood. Is that correct?
Excuse me, say that again.
Sure, yeah. I believe you had mentioned that there was some spots where it was illuminated and you did test for the presence of blood, but nothing was located or no further testing was done.
When we got a positive reaction for luminol, I would go to the area that had the strongest luminescence or fluorescence and swab that area. We then conducted a phenolphthalein, which is the presumptive test for phenolphthalein or for blood. We had several negative tests, but we also had positive tests for the presence of blood. So there could be a combination of both things going on there.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Just briefly. And these areas were swabbed and samples were collected in the course of this luminol?
It was, yes.
And those were later sent to some of your colleagues at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab?
It would have been tested later on, yes.
All right, nothing further.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Released
sir.
from my subpoena then as well?
Is he released from his subpoena?
We'll talk later about that, but not for right now.
Not for right now. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Anna, can we approach?
Yes. Folks, that's going to be it for today. The processing of evidence and presentation will continue tomorrow, and I appreciate all of your attentiveness today. We'll run the same schedule tomorrow, so if you can be here and we'll be set to go ourselves at 8:45, we'll get started at that point in time. In the meantime, as you go home from here today and as you, I hope, rest this evening, again, stay away from observing any media reports, having any conversations or discussions, or taking any steps yourselves to learn anything further, and avoid being in any position where anyone around you is talking about the case or providing you purposely or inadvertently with any information. I appreciate everything today, and I hope you all have a good rest this evening. Brandon?
All right, so adjourned.